So today we're going to talk about the reintegration of children's soldiers in Sierra Leone. My name is Melissa. We have Ezekiel, Jesse, and Faduma. So for our objectives during this presentation, we'll be talking about the history, why there's a reintegration of children's soldiers into the society. The stakeholders are the organizations such as UNICEF. UNICEF is pretty much an organization that protects the rights and lives of children around the world. Another organization we'll be talking about is the World Child, which is an NGO that provides assistance to children that experience conflict during the war and afters. And after that, Fadumo and Jesse will talk about the project details on what they're focusing on right now. So a little history about why there's children's soldiers. So in Sierra Leone, there was an 11-year war where a neighboring country in Liberia, this conflict actually spilled over to Sierra Leone, and the Sierra Leone's army was actually attacked by the rebels. They called the Revolution United Front (RUF), which was one of the major players and stakeholders that Ezekiel would explain later. Their former leader was a actual army corporal called Fude Sanko. He actually collaborated with the Liberian rebels, and who ran it was actually the president of Liberia, which is Charles Taylor, who led the National Patriots Front of Liberia. And pretty much when RUF was taking over, they spread across the country. They were claiming territory. They were recruiting children. That's why this whole children's soldiers started coming, because a lot of the RUF members were young adults, which I will explain later in the next slide about the causes of the war. But there's a lot of threats. There's a lot of killings. There was a lot of raping. And there was one peace agreement that was initiated, was called the Abidjan Agreement, but it failed miserably. And other military coups were rising and seizing power across Sierra Leone. And then in July 1999, the Lomé Agreement was presented, which is a power-sharing plan that included which included Sanko and other rebels in the government. And however, it required RUF and another coup to surrender weapons. With that, a lot of resentments continued on in Sierra Leone, and more attacks, more killings. And in May 2000, Sanko was captured, and the RUF was driven away with the help of the British troops. And then in 2001, the United Nations in Sierra Leone worked to implement a compromise, trying to and securing more of the country again. And then in 2000, the war finally ended. So the causes of the Civil War was really driven by a lot of greed and grievance. I don't know. But anyways, with greed, that's because of economic profits. So Sierra Leone is known for their diamonds. Not only that, the government was very weak, especially after the post-colonial rule of the British, and a lot of the leaders and business people were very corrupted in Sierra Leone, and which left a lot of the young population, the next generation, very marginalized, because there was budget cuts in health and education. There was with that, there was no proper education and employment, which which shrank a lot of opportunities for this young population, and the larger employment and employed youth groups started growing. And eventually, Sierra Leone was known as a shadow state, which means it's a formal personal rule where it's just like everything is pretty much based on an individual decision interests only on the individual. Even though there is no set of written laws, procedures, everything was for that individual. So, reintegrating back in society. So, we wanted to focus on how this is the problem because there's if we were back in the early 2000s, the problem was, we have children. Sierra Leone so children soldiers. Now it's saying, okay, the war is over, but how are we go? How the problem is, how are we going to integrate back these children now? Now after almost 10 years, how do we integrate them back? How are they coping with, and how are they dealing with trauma after all these years? So 10,000 children were actually involved into the war, and 8,500 were documented. During their time in war, they were forced, and they had to perform difficult choices and acts just so they could survive. This means like killing a family and neighbors, chopping off legs and arms, including as a young child, they were forced to rape other girls, and they had to burn down towns. A lot of the a lot of the a lot of the girls who were abducted were sexually abused. They were forced to become bushwives, which bushwives are initially means that they were informally attached to a single adult male community. A lot of the boys and girls took drugs and alcohol. And from this, after the war, there was a study stating that had 273 who had former children's soldiers who were diagnosed with depression and anxiety. Not only that, girls scored with ranges of different levels of depression. They were mentally and physically abused by their bush husbands and by other male and boy soldiers. And boys were scored with more vulnerability. With this, the whole in reintegrating back to society is like, how do you deal with dealing with psychological trauma? Also, not only that, if you're these children are facing with emotional feelings, it's also physically, communities do not want them back because they fear for what they did to them, as well as the potential of what they could do next, even though these children are trying to reintegrate them back into society. It's like, how do we deal with these children, and like as a community, and as individuals who are trying to help them. So next would be Izika, who's going to talk about stakeholders.